I did it on my first record, Vital, and I mean, I'm continuing this pattern, and some great engineer is gonna laugh at me, and I can't wait to be like, whatever. But
This is about you and your journey in music, and we'll talk about the new record you have coming out.
wow, where do we begin?
Let's start off with Born and Raised.
Born and raised in the place that I'm now living, which is Nashville, Tennessee. Uh,
Wow. That's where I'm at too. We should have just done this in person.
oh, crazy! Where are you?
I'm south by Franklin.
Okay, I'm in Nashville. My first, so you'll know all of these things. My first
Okay.
job was at Tootsie's, which is
Really?
strip club. It is obviously, you know what it is. It's a famous bar downtown, and my mother's picture is above the bar because our family knows Steve Smith very well, and he was gracious enough to give me a job as a bartender there. Um, which is funny because I think I was the only male bartender for sure. Uh, but also I would like bartend and then like get up with the band and sing. And I don't know, it was just a really interesting way to experience Nashville.
Sure. Wow. What an incredible job.
Yeah, I don't think that I realized it until later that, like, first of all, when a crowd looks at you and is like, what is this like, you know, I don't know what they were judging me as back then, but whatever. It's like I'm not the normal vibe, I guess. But I would get up and I would like sing down with the band, and the place would go wild. And I feel like that's a pretty good test of like if you can go into a crowd where they're like, this is gonna be nothing, and then
Uh-huh.
you sing down, then all of a sudden they have a little bit more respect for you.
That is rad. What a rad job again. So born and raised in Nashville. What was it like growing up here? I mean, I grew up in San Diego and I moved here as a transplant. I know a lot of people are transplants to Southern California, so I can't imagine growing up here immersed in this.
I feel like the toughest part was just trying to find a place to land. You know what I
Mhm.
mean? It was like I started taking voice lessons when I was 9 with a teacher here. And fun fact, Chris Young had the voice lesson right before mine, and it's just funny because obviously Chris Young has become a superstar, but to me he was a superstar because I was younger and would always show up to my lessons like 5 or 10 minutes early just so I could like watch, like him sing.
Oh, okay.
And the voice lessons were like the best part of it, but once I stepped outside of like music and singing in this town, it very quickly became like you are, one of these things is not like the other, you know what I mean? And it was a really tough place to find how to fit in, like it's it's legendary as a country music town, it's
Mhm.
legendary as the buckle of the Bible Belt. And what do you do when you don't fit into any of those spaces, back then? It was like the only thing I knew how to do was run away as fast as I possibly could. I'll never forget, kind of connecting to this record Meridian Volume 2, which is a part of Meridian that I've made. It's really interesting that in the making of it and in the finishing of it and in the journey of it, I found myself coming back to this place that 10 years ago, I'll never forget. A manager in music, I was sitting across from him, and he just goes, "You'll never make it in music as an openly gay person in Nashville." And I was like,
Wow.
okay, uh, well, I'm not going to sacrifice my life, and maybe I'm going to go nowhere, which is just funny to revisit these feelings and these thoughts. But like, maybe I'll go, maybe this goes nowhere. But to me, following my heart meant, well, I was not going to come to Nashville, Tennessee 10 years ago. Do you know what I mean?
Mhm. Is that what led you to going to New York?
No, this was actually after New York.
Oh, it was. Okay.
Between going from New York, in New York, it was either I go to Nashville or I go to LA. It was like
Okay.
I'm buying a one-way ticket and I'm going one place, which I still to this day believe that if you've never sold everything you own once and like got a one-way ticket somewhere at some point in life, I don't want to cause like the craziest ricochet here, but I do believe that it felt crazy at the time, but the thought that like I needed to sort of actually this is crazy. I was just reading about like the phoenix, that like rises from the ashes.
Sure.
The most important thing is not that the phoenix rises from the ashes, it's that the phoenix is willing to like burn everything down and then rises from the ashes. You know what I mean? And
Sure.
that was that moment for me leaving New York. But this manager in Nashville was like, you'll never make it here as an openly gay person. And I wasn't going to sacrifice, my heart and my humanity just to try to get ahead,
Make it. Yeah.
So that's what took me to LA 10 years ago. And literally, I'm pretty sure to the date, because like, you know, because Facebook gives you this weird like memory that you look
Memory moment.
I want that, okay? But I'm pretty sure that 10 years to the date, like some synchronistic magic, um, I left LA and now I'm in Nashville, which is a really interesting full circle experience to be in Nashville making music, releasing music, and being like, I didn't hide who I was. And I'm really proud of that.
Yeah, and still, I would say, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong. Would you say that it changed quite a bit in those 10 years? Nashville?
Oh yeah. I
Okay.
mean, um, I'm not the first, I'm not the only, and I'm certainly not the last, but it's like uh there's definitely I want to say there's a queerness to this city that's really like palpable and exciting. Um I also in therapy, shout out to those who go to therapy. In therapy was talking about like it's a very different experience being a queer person in the South
Hmm.
versus being a queer person in New York or LA, because it's just it takes a different kind of courage.
Oh, I would for sure, for sure.
So though Nashville has changed and I sense it and I'm excited to be a part of that change, I feel like there's a different kind of bravery when it comes to like existing in a town outside of the sort of coastal towns and remaining true and boldly who you are, which is incredible to see the town like shifting in that way and incredible to watch it happening like you know through the internet, like seeing people just like not having um the same fears and worries that I had 10 years ago when I was like, okay, well, if that's the criteria, if I can't do it in a town like Nashville as myself, then I'm not going to go to Nashville.
Hmm. Well, everything you're saying makes total sense. I mean, it is still rooted pretty heavily in like in Southern values here. I mean, coming from California and in San Diego, you said it's the buckle of the Bible Belt, which makes sense. I mean, you'll go into a doctor's office and there's a Bible there. And I was like so shocked the first time I saw that. And just it just still has that. You'll still see people with like Confederate flags on their cars. And you don't see that too often in Southern California. So it kind of like it still shakes me a bit. I'm like, whoa, like that. People are just openly rocking that on their car.
Yeah, I think that that's I mean, the shake part of it, while I want to acknowledge the growth and the shifting nature of this town in the
Mhm.
last 10 years, like you're exactly right. I mean, I have had people, ask me like, so what church are you joining? And
Mhm.
there's like nothing wrong with like that. First of all, I'm Jewish, so I'm not joining a church. And also I
Well, that's a
have
great, a solid answer you can give them.
question, uh the question is, I think, the crux of the issue,
Mhm.
because it's like, you know, let's just talk about like how the question is indicative of a system that means that, like, this is how you show that life is good. It's like let's just put them all into a box. It's like you're in a relationship, you've got a job, you've got kids, you've got a church, you've got, like, boom boom boom, you stacked up your life. Is that really the only expression that is true? I don't think it is.
Mhm.
I um I don't even know that I've ever said this out loud, but it's like sometimes in the South they have this way of being like, well, as long as you're in a heterosexual relationship and you attend church and whatever, then you're a good person.
Mhm.
Well, there is a lot that makes a person a good person that is not about, like, the church that they go to or the relationship that they're in. There's a
Mhm.
lot more to people than them fitting the boxes that society wants you to fit, is what I'm trying
Mhm.
to say.
No, totally. I completely agree with you. I will say, like, in another sense too, that I feel like again, I'm not from here, so I'm so new to it. But growing up, I associated Nashville with only country music. Like, okay, I'm not huge on it, and I was like, okay, well, yeah, that's just Nashville. That's just Nashville. They're country music. That's it. But now it's such a shift here. There's so many pop artists and you hear about these people. I mean, doing these interviews, like I didn't realize you're going to go on tour with them, but Small Pools, those guys live here.
Right.
And it's like, wait, what? Like this pop band lives in Nashville? Like it records their records here in Nashville, and it's just so different.
Yeah, I I actually, like, I again just moved here, and yesterday had a session in my house for the first time, and honestly, I'm so excited about what I'm releasing, and I'm also so excited about what I'm making beyond what is coming out soon. And it's like it has nothing to do with um where I am. And I feel like that shifted for me during this, what do we call it? The
Pandemic.
quarantines, not to make small of it, but sometimes I just have to call it by a different name just to move through it. Um,
Mhm.
the past year and a half has been difficult, but, like, honestly, I am talking to you through the exact same setup that I recorded my vocals for Wonder with Sarah Bareilles. The largest
Really?
record I've ever been a part of was recorded in my bedroom by myself through, mm, here,
That's crazy.
and I think that, like, I was thinking about this morning, there are so many preconceptions to how you think it's supposed to happen. Like, you need to be in LA or you need to be wherever, but really it's like it's really about heart and soul. And I recorded it in my bedroom with this gear that probably costs under $300.
Yeah. Probably cheaper than I was gonna say,
Well,
way
actually,
cheaper than the mic that Sarah Bareilles probably recorded her vocals on.
well, I mean, I feel like, I don't know if I'm like, what, I think she's such a real person. I'll just say this: like, Sarah sent me her vocals on GarageBand.
That's rad.
I recorded them in my room. This is me, and this is a Grammy winning artist,
Artist.
and we're doing it in whatever way we can, which I
Mhm.
think is not like, oh wow, wish they could have gone back and done it better, because I'm very proud of it. It's
Mhm.
actually, we did it in whatever way we could, which is, I think, the largest message for this last year and a half is, like, you know, we got through it in any way that we possibly could.
Mhm.
And for me, it was making music in my bedroom and finishing these songs that through the making of it and through the finishing of it, it led me back home. You know,
Mhm. Did it
and
kind of take you back to the first record that you put out, or the first songs that you had written? Was doing this in your bedroom? Was that something where it started?
I think it took me back. I think it just stripped me of everything I thought I was supposed to be. Do you know what
Okay.
I mean? Like,
Yeah, yeah.
not just talking about gender, but we're talking about gender, but we're also talking about, you know, the people think that there's like a one way to make music, that there's a one way to engineer a record. Now, I'm sure that engineers would be like, but you don't have a pop filter on your microphone. And it's like, well, yeah, and honestly, you might hear it. You know what? But also, you might feel it in a different way because no, I didn't do it by the book. You know,
Mhm.
it wasn't even like, it's an interesting question. It wasn't like returning to how it was. It was like getting down to the essentials of what it means to make music and to connect with
Mhm.
people, and it wasn't, I'm going to wait for the moment where this is over and then I'm going to start making music. Because to me, it was like, I'm getting kind of emotional thinking about this. It was literally like, I'm going to make music through it because that's how I'm going to ground myself. That's how I'm going to, like, you know, that's how I'm going to get through it. And in the process of it, you know, it was one thing at a time. It was wonder, which just started this whole journey, and then it went viral on TikTok, and it was like, okay, like let's fly, let's run with it, and let's see what happens, all from the confines of my one bedroom that had rats and lizards, and I sometimes am like the Noah's Ark of, like, creatures were in my room, but um we did it. We got through it.
Yeah, wow. It sounds like we were inspired enough, to write these amazing records during quarantine. I've talked to people that were like totally uninspired.
Well, I mean, it's interesting. I guess I didn't set out to, like, make something. It wasn't like, if I
Right.
don't get through this time with something to show, I'm nothing. It literally, like, some people baked bread and
Yeah, that was a big thing. Sourdough bread for a minute. Like,
sourdough committee, well done. Not my vibe, not my journey,
right,
not my
right.
ministry. Cooking, not my thing. Not a vibe. But for me, going to the song and going to this music is honestly, it I'm just realizing this, saying it out loud. It's like, it is what kept me going.
Mhm.
It wasn't like, well, I'm going to make something to show something. It literally was just like, I mean, it's all in the words. I wonder if anyone will hear this. Don't think about it. It's
Mhm.
all like, if the walls fall down in the citadel, will I face my fears? Will I face myself? If I crumble, will I cry? Will I have the heart to rise? If the walls fall down in the citadel, like the walls fell down.
Mhm.
There's a line in it, you are not in survival mode anymore. And to be honest, I wrote it hoping I would get out of there. Do you know what I mean? Because for me,
Right.
I was in survival mode.
Yeah.
So it's not even about productivity. It's not even like, oh wow, look how productive I was. It was really like, look how I look how I got through in any way I possibly could. And I feel like that, again, is what I hope people think about when they emerge from this time, is like, give yourself grace and patience and a pat on the back. Let
Mhm.
me give you a pat on the back, because if you made it through, you made it through a once in a generation
Oh yeah.
experience. Once in a, maybe one person has anyone. I mean, I guess someone is 103, but like, you know,
Yeah.
I'm not. My parent, well, my mom is not. Oh God, my dad passed, but it's like, uh, we made it through something that is not just a news clip. It is a moment in the ancient histories of civilization. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
Um, and I got through it by cultivating songs in my bedroom.
Mhm. and creating art where
Or
some
now
people weren't able to do that. Yeah, and that's well. I want to back up a little bit here. So you talked about being in voice lessons when you were 9. When did you start writing songs?
um I was just having this conversation last night because I wish there was like a timeline that had more clarity, but it wasn't writing songs to me. It started when I was 9. I also started taking piano lessons at 9 with a teacher in Nashville. And if you know anything about Nashville, they don't really teach like do re mi fa sol la ti do, like
Huh?
that thing. They teach 1 4 5. So if you know what that means, you know what that means. They teach 1 4 5, 6 minor, 2 minor. That's what they do. For sus, like if that is language to anyone, then we're on the same page. But it basically they teach a numeric like chord structure. So at 9, I could be put a chord structure for basically any song in front of me and I could read it. And it was
Hmm.
like I didn't really realize what that was. It was just like, okay, that's C, that's F, that's G. You know, they say about country music, it's 3 chords and the truth.
Right, right.
Um, but at that moment, it was like, let me just take some chords and let me like mumble some like I love you forever words or whatever that made no sense at 9. But
Right.
that's that's how I started making music, was like, well, if I can play some chords and I can talk about what I'm feeling, um, then maybe that's a song. But to me that wasn't even like, oh wow, I'm 9 years old and I'm writing a song. It was just I'm 9 years old singing and playing music, and like it's fun to me.
Hmm.
My dad, um I think I had taken trombone or something in school, and my dad was like, no, you need to take piano because um you need to sing and play with the piano. He's not in music, was not in music, but I'm really glad that he pointed me towards the piano.
Hmm.
I also cried yesterday. I cry every day, but whatever. I cried yesterday because I now have the piano that I grew up on, which is the piano my dad told me to like start playing piano on, is now in.
Wow,
You
that
know,
is amazing.
I wrote a song on it yesterday, and it was just like, it's just I don't I don't know if getting older makes you feel like you forget what is magical, and then a moment like, I'm writing on a piano that I grew up on. To me, that's magic.
Yeah, that's huge. You should use that in a recording, I would imagine you're going to.
The piano?
Yeah.
Oh, it's in it. It's
Oh,
in
it
it.
is?
Yeah.
Oh,
It's in
awesome.
it. And it's also, uh, I did it on my first record, Vital, and I mean, I'm continuing this pattern, and some great engineer is gonna laugh at me, and I can't wait to be like, whatever. But you know, the voice memo on the iPhone captures it in a beautiful way that I think makes a beautiful texture, and there's no um, cables involved, and you record it, and it becomes this beautiful texture within the recording. And again, it's just another example of, they tell you that like there's one way to do the industry and there's one way to make music, and like when you find out that that's a lie, you're free you know
Mhm, mhm.
um yeah,
Wow.
pull that.
Did you, did you go to college for music? Or did you stay in Tennessee?
No, I went to college. I actually went to college for theater at
Okay.
Northwestern in Chicago. And I think that part of it was because I was always a singer, but uh I wanted to like enrich the like I just wanted like, it wasn't a conservatory, it was really like an education. So I took like literature classes, and I took, sciencey classes, and I took all these different classes, and it was more about like, I I don't know. I'm getting asked a lot to like talk to students and share like, kind of the journey. So it's making me reflective of just because you can sing doesn't mean that you should sing. Do you know what I mean? Or like,
Mhm.
just because you can sing doesn't mean that you have something to say, you know? And to sort of take it in a different way, like college for me was less about the college and more about like coming a like becoming a human, you know? There's a there's a Bob Dylan autobiography, Chronicles Volume 1, of which there's only one volume, which I'm obsessed with that fact. And he in it is like he started as a folk singer singing other people's songs, and he's like, when you're a good singer, you have plenty of songs to sing, but then at some point you want to pull back the curtain and you want to be like, what's beyond it, you know? So I went to school for theater where I had lots of songs given to me to sing, you know, and it was like, you're a good singer. Please sing my song. Sing this, you know. Ended up going to Broadway. Sing this, sing this, sing this. And at some point, it was like, what am I actually saying? It's not
Mhm.
enough to just sing and have a nice voice. What do you what are you saying? Who are you? What is the point? Because again, it has nothing to do with um it has nothing to do with, you know, technical ability. To me, it's like, you can sing, okay, cool, but what are you saying, you know?
Mhm.
So it's interesting, like that schooling experience for me was less about like what I learned in the school and that I went there for theater. It was more about falling in love and having my heart broken and being a human. And then at some point it was like, I have so much more to say than what these songs that are given to me are trying to have me say.
Mhm. And when do you start writing these thoughts down and putting music out as Morgan?
Um that was I mean, there's a period of time between like 2013 and 2016 when first when the first song came out as Morgan with an X.
Mhm.
And I remember that there was a journal entry um, that I was, you know, sometimes I go back and read bits of my journal just to be like, what were you vibing on at this time? And I just remember seeing Morgan with an X um, in like written down in there, just MORGXN with no context. And I was like, I remember looking at it and being like, that, who's that? What is that? Um, and around the same time, I had a song called XX that
Mhm.
was, you know, that's now out, that's on my first album. And I think that there was just something that was connecting me between XX and the X, you know.
Mhm.
All this to say, there's no master plan here. Like this is flying by the seat of my pants, right? But going on, there was this Stevie Wonder, who I haven't set at my office, so it's on the floor somewhere. But my dog is named Stevie after Stevie Wonder.
That's amazing.
Stevie Wonder has a album, Songs in the Key of Life, and in the
Mhm.
liner notes he writes that Stevie Wonder, first of all, his real name is Steveland Morris, and he realized at some point that Stevie Wonder was the vessel in which Steveland Morris gets to like express himself or carry these thoughts forward. And my dad had just passed. I, you know, had this music. I saw Morgan with an X in this journal, and it was like, this is this is a message. This is like more than just like, oh, this is me singing songs. This is like what I'm trying to communicate. And that's really where Morgan with an X was born. But then it was like, and again, this is where there's no like master plan. It just, the universe started being like, okay, this is keep going in this direction, because that's when I became really like connected to the idea that like maybe all these constructs we grew up with are just constructs. You know, I started reading about Mr., Mrs., MX, or like Latina, Latino, Latinx. There was like this X was representative of shift and of like non-binary and of like removing the constructs, you know. And it was just like it was it sang to me. It was like this is the way that you express the music. This is the way that you express who you are. And that's really where Morgan with an X was born.
And you already had XX out, and then following that, you, you put out Home, which has massive success.
Yeah.
Talk to me about that.
Well, that was you know, it's interesting. It was just one song at a time. The first song I put out was Love You with the Lights On.
Mhm.
And the second song was Home. And with Home, I had recorded it, and I had recorded the choir here in Nashville. I got some friends together and we
Oh,
recorded
interesting.
in a living room. But then my dad passed, and that ruined me.
I
Um,
can't
it,
even imagine.
it was so hard and sudden and no warning, and all of the things that still to this day, it's like grief is non-linear. It just sort of like pokes its head.
Mhm.
Home was the song I had written just before he passed, or just finished recording just before he passed. But when he passed, it's sort of like I just forgot everything and what I was doing. And then I'll never forget that, like, I was listening through songs, you know, I had to take time before I could do anything. I wasn't just gonna like, I was supposed to release an EP that fall, scrapped it.
Right.
And I was listening through, and I listened to Home, and I cried because, you know, I knew I recorded it in Nashville. I knew it was the last thing I did. You know, it was maybe like July 31st or something that I recorded the choir on Home, and my dad passed September 1st. So it was like that was the last thing I had done. And I remember hearing it and just being like hit in the gut, because this is so special and my dad has never heard it. You know, at the time I was like, he's never heard it, though now I have the feeling that he hears it all, but that's a whole nother podcast and a whole nother chapter. It basically was just, this song has to come out, and that's, you know, and it did. And I was on tour at the time, and I just sang it every night, you know. At the end of the day, um that's all I really can do and will do, is that I make the music and I share it in the most honest way I possibly can, you know. And that was Home. I just sang it on tour, but I remember like, I think there was this moment, and it happened recently, but it was like this moment where the chorus of Home happened, and I think I, like, you know, said to the crowd, I was like, hands up, and like the whole, like, you know, room of people, like, just like hands in the air, like just fully alive. And it was like, I think this song might be connecting, you know. um we just had a year and a half of not playing shows, except for playing these virtual shows, which again, did the best we could.
Sure.
Good. But I was just at Riot Fest in Chicago.
Oh, awesome. I saw a lot of footage from that.
Yeah, with
Super
Meg Myers,
jealous.
which she and I have a song together called I Hope You Cry.
Mhm.
I really wrote through this pandemic in that's how I got through it. But I Hope You Cry, and I started singing, and the crowd just erupted in like applause and like energy. And it was like, oh my god, it was like waking a dragon. You know what I mean? It was just I'm really talking in circles here, but it's really like home. The moment that home came out for me is sort of, it's reminding me of what's happening with the music right now. It's just like watching it connect and watching it connect with people live is the best thing in the world.
Hmm. So you were already touring before that song really, blew up on radio and everything else.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I mean
Okay.
the journey of
Started
home was a journey.
right.
It
Because you
was
put it out in what, 2016, and then it took a couple years for it
yeah,
to
it
hit
was
radio.
yeah, it didn't hit radio until after I played Lollapalooza in 2018.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, 2018. And at the time, I had been in the studio with my friend Nick, who's in Walk the Moon,
Hmm.
and they were playing Lollapalooza, and I was playing Lollapalooza. And we had written this song that's now out called Blue. But at the time, we had written it and we were in the studio, and it was like, well, we're not going to play this song that no one's going to hear for who knows how long.
Hmm.
But Nick always sent me these videos of him singing along to Home. Like he would just hear it, out and about or whatever. And so I was like, why don't you just like come on stage and like sing it with me? Not realizing that that would literally be the most iconic debut at Lollapalooza ever,
Uh-huh.
um, because it really was. We both showed up unplanned. My life is a series of unplanned magic. We both show up wearing all white, just like looking like little like fairy angel nymph things,
Hmm.
and we sing Home at Lollapalooza, and it's just a sea of people, and it's just incredible energy. And in that moment, I think within that week we recorded it, and set to release it as a collab, and that's basically what took it to radio, and that incredibly magical adventure.
How did that change your career, like making radio? Were you signed to a label at this time, and were people reaching out?
Signed to a label. The label took it to radio, and um,
Just
yeah,
blew up.
it's interesting. It's interesting. One of the thoughts that comes through with Meridian and what's happening now, and with Wonder and everything that's happened this year, is that I have done it independently. And where I thought that like radio and the label was like the way to connect and do things, in terms of numbers, my numbers are 3 times higher now independently without all of it.
Right. Isn't
So,
that fascinating? I mean, I came from radio 16 years doing it, and I just kind of slowly saw it, you know.
yeah, I have great friends at radio, and I like, and I'm really like, it's really, I'm really appreciative of the support that I have received there, both with Home and also with Wonder and Don't Think About It, and people who
Mhm.
are just like, I really want to play it, which I love. But the actual connection that has happened in a space where none of that has been present. um you use the word, I think you just said, isn't that fascinating? Like,
Mhm.
it is fascinating. It's inspiring. It's confusing. It's confounding.
Mhm.
And it's also revolutionary, because I think that, again, growing up in Nashville, you know, all I knew, and this town is still a very label driven town,
Mhm.
but that's also shifting as well. There's just no one way to do this thing. And that is really wild to me and exciting.
Mhm. Yeah, because if you think about it, if you are a new artist and you put out Wonder and it goes viral on TikTok, and say you had no success prior to that, you wouldn't need. I mean, that's enough nowadays, right?
Yeah. I mean, I'm all about the journey. You know,
Hmm.
it's what Meridian is. Meridian is all about change and flow, and I think that in a weird way these songs are both hopeful and hopeless at the same time. You know, there's a line in Burden, which is not out, that's you can be hopeful, you can feel hopeful, wait, you can feel broken and still be okay. You can, like, there's just like, oh, what am I trying to say? I lost my thought. But the point is like, I thought there was one way to do this,
Hmm.
and I just keep relearning that there's no one there's just no one route. And if you are
Sure.
a new artist and you're like, what do I do? Just do. You know, just try. Just go for it. Just
Hmm.
sing your song, you know, release your song, let it go, keep going, because it is about how it adds up. You know, it's
Hmm.
not just one moment in time. It's really like, it's really the story that you're telling, and that's always what I connect with the most.
Sure. Well, with Meridian, you've put out volume 1 so far, and you have volume 2 coming out. Were these all written in the same? I mean, it sounds like you started this project when quarantine happened.
Yeah, I mean, it was always one project. Uh, I made the decision to go volume one and volume two after Wonder basically caught fire at the end of 2020,
Hmm.
because I had remixes done with my friends, and it basically like became Wonder became its own world, you know.
Sure.
And then I had I had this project that I was like, what is that going to become? And I had a dream. Literally, I sound crazy, but whatever. I'm done caring about that. I had a dream, and Meridian was like the message. I You can call me crazy, and that's fine. Meridian was the message. And I remember thinking, well, I was like, maybe that's my next project, because Wonder's my project.
Hmm.
Wonder is the thing. Well, Wonder ended up being an album of all versions of Wonder. That's what happened with Wonder. And
Because you've yeah, I mean, Small Pools we talked about them earlier. They remixed it. Paris remixed it. That's huge. I
yeah,
mean,
yeah, it's pretty great. It's pretty crazy. All independent, just
that's so
vibing
cool.
on vibing. Um, Wonder became its own world, and then I was like, oh yeah, Meridian, that's the message. Like, it is all about how you let things shift and flow, you know. And if there's anything I learned from this year, it's that it's not gonna go how you thought, you know. And so Meridian was the title, but then, you know, to be honest, it was a combination of, you know, my own um heart, but also awareness that, like, the world moves very differently now than it did 2 years ago, 3 years ago, 4 years ago, whatever. For me, it was like, I have this project, but I want to release it in a new way. You know,
Mhm.
there's the quote that's like, in order to have something you've never had, you have to do something you've never done. So rather than forcing this whole project into being born in one moment, it was like, let's pace it out, let's spread it out. And again, in the journey of there is no master plan, there's just doing your best and continuing. Volume one happened. And around that time, I got an email from Sarah Bareilles being like, because we had talked about this for a while, but it didn't line up. And then I got an email. Hey, I think I posted it. It was like, don't you forget about me. Do you still want to do this duet? And it was like, well, if that's not the most magical timing ever, because this is a perfect time to revisit Wonder, because I just released volume one and we can dive into Wonder. You know, it was just magical. It just lined up. And it was only because I had decided that I would separate the projects.
Mhm. And so did you know what songs you're going to put on volume 1 versus volume 2, and were they
Yeah.
all done?
Yeah.
Okay.
that was pre-planned. I didn't plan that it would that Wonder would happen in between them, and I didn't. Yeah, that's all I knew. I had split it already, and
Okay.
Volume One is coming. And Volume One to me is honestly the songs that I had finished just at the end of like my last label experience,
Mm-hmm.
and to me they sort of documented a sort of like uh breaking down of myself and of what I was going through, like losing myself in Porcelain. We're dealing with a sort of like the brokenness that I felt at the end of 2019. But then Volume Two, to me, was a more hopeful how I'm piecing the pieces back together. Like You Are Not in Survival Mode Anymore being a wish and a hope for getting out of this feeling of being in survival mode.
And with both versions of or volumes of this record coming out, were these songs recorded? You talked about doing your vocals for Sarah Bareilles in your room or at your house. Was the rest of the record done similar or totally different?
It it was a I would say that I would say that I had about 90% of like the bones of it done before the we entered these times,
Okay.
and it was the 110% of the finishing that was like mixing it together and adding final bits, but all of it happened virtually over here, and
Okay.
my mixer's in London, so I was never there. And it was all done sort of like in this quarantine.
Virtual world. That's interesting. Do you feel like, I mean, if this wasn't happening, would you have used the person in London to mix a record? And did it make it easier working with them? Because now everyone's so familiar with like Zoom when no one probably was using it two and a
Yeah,
half years ago.
I also was new to the Zoom land
Uh huh.
territory. Um, but it was honestly incredible. It was um it allowed me to, well, here's one example. I think
Okay.
like that with mixing the record, there's a feeling like you have to um you need it to happen immediately, but there was
Mhm.
nothing that needed to happen immediately for me. It was just, I want to take these songs to a completion, and of course I don't know that anything's ever done, but it was like I want to see where this goes. And the mixing process sometimes can feel like you can want to like control everything, but with being virtual and sending files and like waiting and getting something back and time difference, there was just like, well, let's just go one at a time. And sometimes I would get a mix and then I would live with it for 3 weeks, 4 weeks, a few months.
Mhm.
It was like, let me see how I feel when I listen to it when I'm happy. Let me see how I feel when I listen to it when I'm sad. Let me see how I feel when I listen to it when I'm driving. Let me see how I feel when I listen to it in my room late at night. There was like a lot more flexibility than just sort of like, okay, you're in the room together and you've got 4 hours that you've paid for, and let's see what happens. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
Um, it's part of how I even moved to Nashville, because it was like I no longer feel like I need to be in one place. And if there's somebody that I want to work with, it's here. It's virtual.
Right. Well, it's interesting that you bring up the fact that you would listen to it when you're happy or you're sad because I've never heard anyone say that, but it makes sense because if you're happy and you're like in a good space, you're on vacation, you're like, oh, I could totally live here and this would be awesome. And like, and then you think about it, you're like, well, is that really the greatest idea? Or when you're in different places, your mind goes different ways. And if it's still a good record when you're sad or when you're happy, I mean, that says something for it.
Yeah, there's also like I've never said it out loud, but it is very true that like you've probably heard people be like they listen to it on different speakers and they listen to it on their phone because this is where people are going to listen to it eventually. unfortunately, but that's what happens,
Or in
And
their car. Yeah.
I do, but I do it. I listen to it in the car. I listen to it on these monitors. I listen to it on my phone. I listen to it on different physical speakers, but I do listen to it in a multitude of different emotional spaces, because sometimes, there's let's see an example. I mean, there are things where I'll first hear a mix and I'll be like, I think that's wrong, or it's no, 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 no. And then I'll give it a little space and I'll come back to it and I'll listen again, and then I'm like, "Oh, it's not that it's wrong. It's that it's so right. It jars me." And I think that's actually essential to the message of is um what is what this song is about,
Mhm.
There was in the opposite way though, there was this like one reverb tail on Burden that like was bothering me so much, and I was like, I can't tell if I'm bothered by it or if I'm just sad. And ultimately, after listening to it for like literally months, that one took a long time to mix because I couldn't stop crying every time I listened to it. Burden is the last song I wrote in the final hours of 2019, not realizing what a burden 2020 and 2021 would
Would
be.
become. Yeah.
Um, but there was just this one reverb tail, and finally, after months of like listening to it, and it jarred me in every emotional headspace, I was like, I'm going to address this reverb tail. No one will notice, no one will care, but that's my process.
Right. I love that. So you said you played at a Riot Fest over the weekend. Was that your first performance in 2 years?
My first performance was well, my first performance was at the Covenant House, which is a youth homeless shelter in Los Angeles, and I got to play for Pride for the kids.
Oh, cool.
That I cried because it was just singing songs to these like, youth who are experiencing homelessness, and like we're celebrating Pride together.
That's
Like
cool.
chills, that was my first performance, but the first time I was on a stage where there was people was at Wonderbus. Wow, Wonder really just follows me. Wonderbus in Chicago, oh my god, where was that? Cleveland.
Oh, is that a thing everywhere? Because they just started in San Diego. I keep seeing people posting about it.
I don't know.
Yeah.
It might be in the same family, but also don't quote me because I don't.
Okay. Yeah. I didn't know if you just knew off the top of your head. Okay.
Um, but yeah, that festival was the first performance, and it was with Small Pools, which
Oh, cool.
do our song together, which we're going to be doing on tour this fall. So it was like, getting to do this song in collaboration with my friends in person for the first time. Um, and it was just, it was I keep being like, it was like putting a fish back in water. It was like it wasn't like, oh, we're returning to normal. It's like we are returning to life,
Hmm.
and it was magical. Riot Fest was incredible. I got to sing with Meg Myers, so I've gotten to do like these like beautiful collabs that all came out in, you know the quarantines
Sure.
that were happened, in this virtual reality that we're in. I got to do them physically in person, safely together with humans, and it was magical.
That is amazing. And then you're going on the road with Small Pools starting what, November 1st? I think there's
November 1st, we start in Atlanta, and I play
amazing.
Nashville November 18th at Exit In.
Yes. And I will be there at that show. That's awesome.
Yeah.
And I thank you so much, Morgan, for doing this, man. I appreciate it.
Yeah. Nice to meet you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. I have one more question. You kind of answered it already earlier, but I'm going to ask it anyway. If you have any advice for aspiring artists.
Don't be afraid to burn it to the ground and start again.
with you.